Mayor's Chaplain, the Reverend Peter Nisbeck, will now say prayers.
Good evening, everybody, and greetings from St. Giles. Let us pray. And the response to Lord, in your mercy is hear our prayer. O God, we bring before you the nations of the world, particularly those where there is conflict and oppression. We pray for leaders of these nations that wars may cease and people live in harmony. Especially we pray for peace in Ukraine, peace for the Palestinian people, and peace for the people of Israel. We pray for people to be raised up who will bring peace with justice. And we pray for places where people are not free to follow the way of life they wish. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We give thanks, Lord, for those who give their time and energies working for the good of this town and this borough. We ask that you will guide their deliberations and be part of their discussions and the business of this evening. We ask for your blessing on this borough, its businesses, its educational establishments and its places of relaxation, that it may prosper and be a place where people want to live and work and spend time. We pray especially for those struggling in our society, the homeless, the sick, and those without work. Help us to bring them hope in their need. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Lord, we particularly pray for answers to be given and solutions found to end the misery that people have had to put up with from Walleys Quarry. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Please join with me in the words of the Lord's Prayer in its traditional form. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. God bless this meeting, and God save the King. Amen.
Please be seated. Welcome to this special meeting, elected members and members of the public and press who have joined us this evening, including by YouTube, where we are hosting a live stream of proceedings this evening. If you'd like to remove your jackets, you may do so. Good evening, members. Before we begin, I need to go over the housekeeping rules. For all those in the gallery, could you actually please turn your mobile phones off? And thank you. Good evening, members. There are no fire drills planned for this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and assemble in the Queen's Gardens at the front of the building. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised to do so. I would like to remind members of protocols around speaking during this meeting. No member should speak until invited to do so by myself. If you wish to speak, please could I ask you to raise your hand high until you've been acknowledged. Please, would all members in the room use their microphones whenever they speak, as without them, anyone watching online will not be able to hear you. To use the microphones, please press the button at the front of the centre and invite you to speak, and wait a moment for the light on your microphone to come on. Please remember to turn off your microphone once you have finished. Members, in the interest of managing this meeting, please do not approach anyone seated at the top of the table for advice or information without first gaining agreement from myself. Should you wish to do so, please raise your hand high. Please also, could I ask at the end of the meeting to make sure that you take all your belongings and any waste with you. Thank you. Before we commence with business, I was saddened to learn that the former councillor David Nixon has passed away. I propose to hold a minute's silence in tribute, and after which I will invite the group leaders or a representative to pay tribute. Please stand. Thank you, members. Please be seated. Councillor Simon Tagg, would you like to say a few words in tribute to David Nixon, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was really sad to hear the news of David's passing. Anybody that knows Dave will know that he was a Conservative councillor and a Conservative member for a number of years. I don't think I'd be active in the party now if Dave hadn't been around at the time. I think a lot of us, that knew him at that time, he was an avid leafleter and got us all interested in going out and campaigning. He was a councillor for Westbury Park, it was called Seabridge, the ward was then, for the Conservatives, and then he fell out with the Conservatives and joined UKIP, and when it came back as a councillor, I believe it was in the Silverdale ward, wasn't it? I think. He's avid campaigning really sort of energised me as a member to go out there, and also I think anybody who's been on the end of his campaigning will know that he, the amount of leaflets that he put out, the amount of campaigning we would do, and that showed in the seats that he won. He was also, people may remember him as, obviously until very recently, as a taxi driver around the town as well. And I always used to get texts from him until fairly recently saying, have you seen that pothole in Poolfields? Have you seen that pothole in the Westlands? Get it fixed. He's always kept me on the hot toes when it comes with things such as that. So really sad. And people also seen his many sort of letters that he avid letter writer to the Sentinel as well, particularly on the European issue. He was many years before the referendum. He was anti-European Union or the EU or the common market. And that was his really driving force as a politician. I know he's very pleased in 2016 with the referendum result, and he's been defending Brexit ever since, until I think probably last time I saw a letter from him was probably last autumn, taking on the odd Lib Dem here and there in the Sentinel letters page. So I think for me, sadness really, and I know that a lot of people within this room will remember him, whether that's fondly or not from his campaigning. But I think as a person, he was obviously dedicated to his cause, and when he wanted to do something like win an election, he made sure he did do so. I send my condolences to his family, and he'll be greatly lost, I think, by his family and also people in Audley. He was well known in Audley where he lived, but also people from across the political spectrum, I think, as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Councillor Jones, would you like to say a few words in tribute,
Thank
please?
you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williams going to speak on behalf of the group.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's sad news, but David, the last time I did speak to him, his health was deteriorating. But to remember him as a cross-youth councillor on the opposite benches to myself, and he was a strong Brexiteer, as the council leaders said, and I was on the opposite benches. I was a Remain. So we can imagine the conversations that we had. But also remember him, he served on the community centre, Ramsey Road Community Centre, and he represented the community as well as all other councillors. He didn't book to any problems. He tried to solve them and work hard for his community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. We will now commence the business for this evening's special meeting at Council. Agenda item 1, apologies. Turning to the agenda, now members, and starting with agenda item 1, I have apologies from Councillor Susan Beeston. Do we have any further apologies, please? Councillor Brockie.
Councillor Rebecca Lewis and Councillor Sylvia Diamond.
Councillor Tagg.
Oh, come on. There we go. Councillor Simon Jones and Councillor Jill Burnett Faulkner. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item, agenda item, is item number 2, declarations of any interest. Are the declarations of interest from any members or officers in relation to any items of business contained with the special meeting agenda? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to place on record that I work for the Harper and Keel Vet School, which is close to the site and may get mentioned during the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Members, we now turn to the next item of business on this evening's agenda, which is an update on the ongoing work on odours from Walleys Quarry. A copy of the report and appendices can be found on pages 3 to 22 of your agenda. Councillor Simon Tagg, would you please now introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to add to your welcomes that you did at the beginning, Mr. and welcome the people in the public gallery tonight, and also I believe those people watching on YouTube as well. And it's really, I share the the dread and the disappointment that we feel as residents of our town about this toxic stink again, which is increasing again and causing harm to our communities. And it feels as though we're back to square one again, doesn't it? Since the massive problems we had a couple of years ago. And I just really feel for people that live right on top of this quarry. And over the years, I've spoken to a lot of people about this and seen how it's affecting their lives. And I think it's something which we need to do all we can. And this report before us today is a comprehensive update from our officers detailing the response and actions of this council in relation to those foul gas emissions from Walleys Quarry landfill over a number of years. It dates back to 2022 if you look at the report. And it's such a complete document that it could be submitted, I believe, in any future public inquiry to show what this council, members of this council, officers of the council have done on behalf of their communities. And I'm sure anybody that's read the report would agree with me that those officers, particularly the professional officers, supported by us as elected members in this room, have done all we can within our powers to try and end the community suffering caused by those toxic emissions from that awful landfill. This includes pursuing the abatement notice enforcement powers as we hold as a council against the operator of the landfill, and also holding the Environment Agency to account. Now, this happens, a lot of people don't know this, but often on a daily basis, our officers are meeting the operator, they're meeting the Environment Agency and other partners to ensure that they are aware of the issues and asking them how they're going to solve them within our powers, of course, which are legal powers. We cannot close the site ourselves. And I assure everybody that the abatement notice is being pursued within the legal framework that we've set out. And only the professional officers can do that, not elected members. We provide the funding for that. We provide and a decision we will probably take later in the meeting will give more funding to do, obviously, to look at the legal issues and to pursue that legal case. Now, we are a small council, a small district council with limited powers, as I've said, and also limited resources and budget, but we're doing all we can, and we believe others should be doing more. And I think what we need to see is the closure of this site. And the report points out that obviously the Cabinet, which is a group of councillors which I chair, which make the decisions within the council on budget, on services, etc., met on the 17th of January and moved a motion that we request that the Environment Agency close the quarry, issue a closure notice to end the rubbish materials, whatever it is. I'm not sure the EA even know what's going into it. Stop that going into there. And then that would lead to a capping off process and also a restoration plan, which is due to take place in 2026 anyway. I believe that should be brought forward. And I think it's a really serious situation that we're in. And I don't think suspending the permit of the operator goes far enough, allowing them to bring the landfill back into order and stop the stink. I think they've had 3 years to do that and they failed miserably, and the EA have overseen that failure. So I think what we have to do is call for a closure notice. And of course, the abatement notice process, I always get comments on social media, get emails, and when I see people in the street, why can't we do this abatement notice? Can we get it in as soon as possible? And as I've said, we're already behind the scenes legally working on this, our officers are. And it's a long process, a long mechanism, but it only ends in a punitive fine against the operator, which can be appealed along every step of the way. And as we saw when we got the boat abatement notice in place recently, it was appealed. That added 6 or 7 months to the process. So we really have to keep doing what we're doing here and on behalf of you as residents and ensuring that we do pursue that abatement notice through its process as per the enforcement policy. But we also have to put pressure on others. Now, both officers and members, cross-party, have been raising the issue both regionally and nationally and have stood together in calling for a public inquiry into the EA's failure to regulate the landfill over a long period. It's not just since the stink really got going in 2021. I've been a member of the liaison committee for a number of years, and I think that they haven't regulated this site properly for many, many years. And that's why we're in the mess we're in at the moment. Now, of course, politics does play its part. We're in a meeting today after a motion was put through for a special meeting, but that was delivered the morning after. We'd had a meeting in here where we were discussing Walleys Quarry. Now, as it turned out, a couple of days later, the Shadow Secretary of State was in town, along with our, the Labour's parliamentary candidate. So I think it was all choreographed to do that, to try and get another meeting to up the temperature. But it was quite disheartening when the Shadow Secretary of State came out against a public inquiry, as well as he did Mr. Reid, which was reported in the BBC. I'm not happy that the government, my party are in charge of the government, haven't said that they will have a public inquiry. And I'm still waiting for a response from the Prime Minister to my letter of the 22nd of January, followed up a couple of weeks ago, to get a public inquiry into this mess so that people are held to account. I think that's what we need to do, and that's what needs to happen, as well as the site being closed. So the proposals put forward by the Labour group, I don't feel go far enough. So we're going to be amending them later. We'll have a debate about that in a bit. I think suspending of the licence doesn't go far enough until the operator meets some sort of compliance, which they've never got anywhere near meeting, in my view, over the last few years. And I believe it's think that the people of Newcastle would agree with us that the time for arguing that suspension is over, and we need to move forward on the closure of this site and pressing for the closure of this site. Because it cannot comply with that permit. So I think that closure notice would be a really important step forward if the EA were to take it. And this council would stand with its partners with the EA to achieve that, because that's what we need to do. And that restoration of the site following the full capping is really important. And as I say, I've been calling for that on and off now for I think 14 times I've called for that over the last few years and restated that on the 16th of the 1st. There are a number of petitions going around now, one from the present MP, I believe, one from the Labour Party as well, all calling for that. And I believe there's over 1,200 signatures now to the one that's been launched by the Member of Parliament only a day or two ago. So you see the public feeling in the direction between this. We also asked, and it's mentioned in the report, Mr. Mayor, about having a judicial review. And I think even, looking into this, I think a judicial review would be an open-ended commitment of this council with limited resources. I think we should be putting our resources into the abatement notice process. And a judicial review wouldn't actually change any decision made by the EA or by the minister not to have a public inquiry in this case. All it would do would ask them to consider again if the judicial review felt that they hadn't followed due process. So it doesn't actually get us any further on that. But we're not, in the amendment I'm going to be putting forward later, we're not closing the door on that. We're asking our officers to look into it more and get a legal view and bring that back to council in the future. Our main thing is this abatement notice process, and our officers are working on that, and also our calls for that closure. Now, as we move forward, I urge all members, we'll be debating the motion, and members of this council later season, to get behind the amendment put forward by my group, and let's continue to stand together on behalf of our residents and call for the EA to issue that closure notice, something which our communities, I know, will need to see daily. That's this, some sort of movement begins to happen. That won't stop the stink overnight, of course, but it will be the first step in stopping the stink. And hopefully we'll stand together. And also, I can assure the people of this borough that we will fulfil our responsibilities as a council through our officers with the powers which we've got. And I think the matter whether the EA acted correctly or not should be for that public inquiry. And I again call for that public inquiry to look into this over a long period, how they have mishandled this site and not held the operator to account when they should have done. So that's my opening remarks, Mr. Mayor, but I commend the report to be read. It's online if you want to see it, and it's actually something which really encapsulates the work that this council has been doing. All of us, both parties that are on this council, have been working in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Councillor Fear, would you like to second the recommendations, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to do that. It's been an interesting day. As I set out for work this morning at about 7 o'clock, I was cycling down Keel Bank. I was overtaken by a large white vehicle. And shall we say, it left an olfactory trail behind it as it whizzed past me. I then was further down the bank, gone round the roundabout, and I was overtaken by something which had come out, I think, of the quarry, leaving me with an equally foul taste in my mouth. And as a cyclist, you actually taste this stuff as well as smell it. And it is very depressing that we are still in that position at this point of time. What I'd say about this report is I think it's an excellent report because it does give us a firm set of information. We've got lots of data there, which I think can't be challenged. What a shame we couldn't have more data. And that, of course, is down to the ineptitude of the Environment Agency, who have made a complete mess of this. I was furious when, strangely, their monitoring equipment was switched off one weekend when the smell was at its worst. And then we find that they've actually not even managed to calibrate these machines properly. And what is particularly irritating about that, it seems to me, is that as far as I can see, no one has been disciplined for that. If I was to go into my place of work and teach people about Aztecs instead of Romans or something like that, I'd be sacked. And quite right too. What depresses me about this is the recycling of people, that horrible phrase, let's just move on. And everyone moves on, apart, of course, from the people who are suffering. And that is absolutely awful. And we need to bring these people to account. Looking at this report, all of it is worth reading. 5.2 and 5.3 pointing out that the Environment Agency have bans from A to F, and Walleys Quarry has been in F for 3 years. So not even Division 4, let's be honest about this, and consistently poor in that regard. More heartening, perhaps, 5.7 and 5.8. The Environment Agency has the power to issue a closure notice, and the link given to us in 5.8 perhaps is getting round to thinking about this. We've had a change at the top in the Environment Agency. We might actually be seeing some leadership for once. Let's hope that these people, and they don't come cheap, actually now start to represent the people who pay them. Where perhaps I could criticise this is that our officers who have written this report have not emphasised the amount of really hard work they've put into this. And as Councillor Taggart pointed out, with very limited powers, I really feel for our officers. It's like going into a boxing fight, not so much with one arm tied behind your back, but with two arms tied behind your back. And they've done a really sterling job, I think. Look at 6.3. The council would need to obtain the consent of the Secretary of State before it is able to prosecute an offence of breaching abatement notice, as the site is permitted by the Environment Agency. That shows us just how much we have been let down by the centre. And it is absolutely shocking. And that's why, like the leader of the council, I feel a public inquiry is necessary to hold these people to account. They don't have to put up with this.
1 minute.
They're doing okay. So why should we not have those people held to account? 6.8 is also interesting. After the abatement notice, we're told it was also agreed that the best practical means of managing this would evolve with the site's development. I'm afraid I don't see any clear evidence that that's happened. There's also some important stuff, I think, about judicial review in section 8. We can come on to that later on, but I think this gives us a full history of what we've tried to do, how we've been let down by the centre, and I would commend everyone to read this, although I'm afraid it's a rather sobering read.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Members, we will now move to the debate. Would any members wish to speak? Please raise their hands. Gosh in heavens. Yeah, okay, we'll start from the far. Councillor Stubbs first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this evening we really need to try and shed light on the critical issues that demands our complete attention. The shambolic intervention of the Environment Agency at Walleys Quarry. This issue strikes at the heart of environmental stewardship, community well-being and the integrity of our judicial system. It is imperative that we demand a judicial review to address the shortcomings and injustices that have transpired. First and foremost, the Environment Agency plays a pivotal role in safeguarding our natural world. It is entrusted with the responsibility of protecting our environment, ensuring the health and safety of our communities, and upholding environmental regulations. However, in this case, in Walleys Quarry, it has become apparent that the agency's interventions have fallen short of these fundamental duties. The situation at Walleys Quarry is not merely a matter of bureaucratic oversight. It is a profound betrayal of trust. The community surrounding the quarry have endured this for years. These odours caused by the improper handling of waste have permeated the air, jeopardised the health and well-being of residents, and undermined their quality of life. Moreover, the Environmental Agency's response to this crisis have been woefully inadequate. Despite numerous complaints and mounting evidence of environmental violations, the agency has time and time again failed to take decisive action to rectify the situation. Its regulatory oversight has been characterised by inertia, complacency, and simply allowing the problems at Walleys Quarry to persist unchecked. By demanding a judicial review now, we can hold the Environment Agency accountable for its failures and compel its full obligations to the public. A judicial review would also provide impartial assessment of the agency's conduct, scrutinising its decision-making processes, and identifying areas of negligence or misconduct. It would serve as a mechanism for justice, empowering affected communities to seek redress for the harm they have endured. Furthermore, Mr. Mayor, a judicial review is essential for upholding the rule of law, preserving the integrity of the regulatory framework. It sends a clear message that no entity, regardless of its authority or influence, is above the law. It affirms the principle that environmental protection is not an aspiration, but a legal imperative, enforceable through judicial scrutiny and oversight. The stakes can't be put any higher. The outcome of this review will reverberate way beyond the confines of Walleys Quarry, setting a precedent for how we confront environmental injustices and hold regulatory agencies accountable. It is a test of our commitment to environmental justice and the principles of good governance. In conclusion, the case of Walleys Quarry represents a stark reminder for the challenges we face in safeguarding our environment and ensuring justice for affected communities. By demanding a judicial review now, we can confront these challenges head on and pave the way for a more equitable and sustainable future. Let us stand together in solidarity with the residents of Walleys Quarry and all those that seek to protect our planet and uphold the rule of law. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, the regulation of the permit for Walleys Quarry by the Environment Agency has been lenient at best. The risk of a lack of tangible action taken against the operator has widespread implications, and these include a perception of leniency, where if one operator perceives that the Environment Agency is not effectively enforcing regulations or imposing penalties for non-compliance, it may lead to a perception of leniency within the industry. Other operators may interpret this as an indication that they can cut corners or flout regulations without significant consequences. Other implications are lowered compliance standards, where in the absence of robust enforcement, some operators may prioritise short-term cost savings over compliance with environmental regulations. This could lead to a race to the bottom, with operators increasingly willing to take risks and engage in practices that compromise environmental protection. There is also the risk of competitive advantage, where operators who disregard environmental regulations may gain a competitive advantage over those who invest in compliance measures. By avoiding the costs associated with proper waste management and pollution control measures, non-compliant operators may undercut their competitors on pricing, potentially driving compliant businesses out of the market. And finally, the normalisation of non-compliance, where if non-compliance becomes prevalent and goes unchecked, it may become normalised within the industry. And this could create a culture where environmental regulations are disregarded or seen as optional rather than mandatory, further eroding adherence to standards and increasing the likelihood of environmental harm. Given all of these implications, have the Council written to the Environment Agency, making the case that a lack of tangible action against Walleys Quarry Limited will embolden other landfill operators to breach permits, thus creating a national pollution disaster?
Brown. And Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of my group, I want to thank the officers for compiling this updated report, particularly in such a short time frame from when Councillor Fox-Hewitt and myself called this special meeting. And I just want to address at this start, this meeting wasn't called for politics. This meeting was called for residents like myself and my family who live across Keele, Silverdale and Nutton, who have to put up with this stink, just like you, every day. I have taken the opportunity to read through this report and note the officers' comments on potential progress actions that could be identified, including activation of the abatement notice, calling on the EA to issue a closure notice, and a potential judicial review. I won't comment too much now on the best course of action, as I feel we will cover this in the motion and amendment debate later. However, I feel at this point it's important to review the raw figures of the data from the monitoring stations to put this in perspective. If we focus on MMF9, or the station within the Gallingale estate, as this is often the worst affected area. I can only review the data for the months of November and December. We all know why. It's due to the issues with calibration of the detectors. However, if we look at those 2 months, I want to concentrate on 2 time periods with the worst exposures. Over the 25th to 26th of November, between 3 a.m. and 9 a.m. on the 25th, residents were subjected to 6 hours of odour that was above the detection threshold, of which 1 hour 15 minutes was above the threshold for potential impact on human health. From 3:20 p.m. until 4:40 a.m. on the 26th, residents were subjected to 13 hours, of which 7 hours was above the potential threshold for impact on human health, including an hour where it was double the threshold at 70 micrograms. The second time period was over the 13th, 14th, and 16th of December, starting at 8 p.m. on the 13th, where residents were subjected to 7 hours, until 2:45 a.m. on the 14th of December, of which 2 hours and 30 minutes were above the threshold for potential impact on human health. Mr. Mayor, I could go on. When we talk about the impact of H2S on human health, the references supplied are for impact on respiratory or other sensitive mucosal membranes, such as eyes. These do not account for sensitive populations, such as those with pre-existing pulmonary conditions, such as asthma or COPD, nor do they account for the cognitive and psychiatric impact of being bombarded by this odour. A very interesting study by Fielder in 2008 looked at a 2-hour exposure of 7 micrograms of H2S on cognitive and psychological measurements. They found, remember, 7 micrograms is for detection of the odour. This is where we're talking hours at this time. They found over 2 hours of exposure, subjects had impaired function on memory tests, increased anxiety, and decreased concentration. I've had the opportunity to speak and discuss the impact of these odours with Dr. Scott at Silverdale GP practice. I've raised this many times. He informed me that because of this, he has seen a requirement to increase medication for patients with pulmonary conditions, but alarmingly, he mentions that he is needed to increase prescription of hypnotics, which are otherwise known as sleeping tablets, and anti-anxiolytics, which are also known as anti-anxiety medication. So why am I making this point, Mr. Mayor? Well, I've highlighted the time periods where the raw data demonstrates that residents have been exposed to huge time periods where levels of H2S are above the threshold for detection, that they've been exposed to hours above the threshold for impact on human health. We've seen the evidence from residents, the local GP, that these odours are having a material impact on their health, thus meeting the legal definition of environmental harm under the Environment Protection Act. The harm caused to these residents is undeniable. The lack of proper regulation by the EA is unfathomable.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Robert Bentley-Smith, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do welcome this comprehensive paper that sets out all the detail and all the issues. And obviously, I speak on behalf of the residents of Thistlebury in particular, which is badly affected by this odour, this outrageous quarry situation. You may recall at the last meeting, Mr. Mayor, that I raised serious concerns based on another example about the effect of long-term exposure to low levels of a poisonous substance. In that case, it was chlorine gas, but it doesn't matter. The principle's the same. And I thank Councillor Jones for articulating the point, having also researched it with GP and others, which is very helpful. It is very, very serious, this potential effect of low-level exposure over time. We don't really know the detail of what it might do, but it's potentially serious. It can't be good because it's poisonous. Hydrogen sulfide is poisonous. Let's make no mistake about that. And so it's not just the odour, it's the fact that the residents are being poisoned by the gas from this quarry. And I support a public inquiry into the failures of the Environment Agency, which is at best hapless. And I think that that needs to be investigated. And also, and I mentioned this at the previous meeting, we do need that public inquiry to actually look at the long-term health effects of this poisonous gas on the residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, we represent the ward of Madeley and Bettley, which is quite a few miles away from the quarry, and therefore you wouldn't think that our ward would be impacted. Well, over the years it has been. And in fact, only yesterday when one of our residents was aware of this special meeting, he emailed us. He lives in Finney Green, which is on the border of Keele and Madeley, and he regularly gets impacted by this, as do others within that vicinity. He was asking for basically us to support whatever we could to try and hold the operator to account. And I just want to put it on record that we will support all punitive measures, including the closure of the quarry, the calling of a public inquiry to hold the EA to account, and if necessary, a full judicial review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Councillor Sweeney. Okay, somebody got the sound aside. Thank you. Councillor Brockey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Due to the serious concerns over the pollutants emanating from Walleys Quarry, the Environment Agency placed ambient air mobile monitoring stations, MMFs, to gather the data on the composition of chemicals in the air in 2020. In April 2021, 2 additional MMFs were deployed in Silverdale. However, the air monitoring station MMF2 at Silverdale Pumping Station was removed on the 4th of January 2024 due to planned works. This vital safeguard still has not been recited. It would seem logical to move MMF2 to the previous location of MMF6, since all the facilities are known to be there, and it can provide data continuity with a move back to the MMF2 site once the Severn Trent construction works are complete. Alternatively, it could, of course, be placed in an eastern position, such as St Mary's School in Nutton. Just a question. Has Council written to the Environment Agency requesting when the resiting is going to be complete, given that this is now 6 weeks since its removal? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockey. Councillor Richards.
The impact of odours from the landfill site on educational establishments is often overlooked. When the previous special meeting was called, which was before my time on the council, I noticed that submissions were received from a number of local schools, the college and the university, about the impact of odours on their ability to provide good education environments. We are now a number of years on from these meetings, and still facing situations where the odour is having significant impact on education providers in the area. The impact of these odours on the university is significant. I know from family and friends that on open days, the university is bombarded with questions about the smell, its frequency and intensity. This must have an impact on potential students' decisions to study here. Recently, we have seen the evacuation of 2 local primary schools in the area due to bad odours impacting students' learning. It is clear that these odours don't just present a risk to human health, but a risk to education as well. Has the leader engaged in any discussions with the county council or educational providers about the impact of the odours in provision of education through our schools and colleges? And if there are any plans to mitigate the impact of lost days due to the evacuation of schools on the basis of strong odours? Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor.
Councillor Lawley.
I did say councillor, thank you. Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So given that the volume of waste to be tipped at the site has increased significantly following the EA's decision to allow the operator to increase. I'll try again. So as there's been a significant increase following the EA's decision to allow the operator to increase its tipping by significant amounts, that variation will lead to a conclusion of tipping at the site earlier than anticipated. Given that the plans for restoration of the site following conclusion of activities will need to ensure that there is no ongoing occurrence of gases, what confidence does the leader have that the restoration of plans are suitable to contain the gases once the site is closed?
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reporting fatigue refers to the feeling of being overwhelmed, disengaged or desensitised due to excessive reporting requirements or the continuous demand for generating reports. It commonly occurs in professional settings where individuals are required to regularly compile, analyse and submit data or information for various purposes, such as compliance, performance monitoring or decision making. When individuals experience reporting fatigue, they may exhibit symptoms such as decreased motivation, reduced attention to detail, increased errors in reporting, and a diminished sense of the value or impact of the reports they produce. This phenomenon can have detrimental effects on organisational efficiency, employee morale, and the quality of decision-making processes. Several factors contribute to the reporting fatigue, including excessive reporting requirements. When individuals are tasked with producing numerous reports or complex data sets within tight deadlines, it can lead to feelings of overwhelm and burnout. Repetitive tasks engaging in repetitive data collection and reporting activities without meaningful variation or innovation can contribute to monotony and disengagement. Lack of perceived value. If individuals perceive that the reports they produce have little impact on organisational goals or decision-making processes, they may become disinterested in investing time and effort into the creation. Inefficient processes, cumbersome reporting processes, such as manual data entry or outdated systems, can exacerbate feelings of frustration and fatigue. To address reporting fatigue, organisations can take several measures, including streamlining reporting processes, simplifying reporting requirements, automating data collection and analysis, and implementing user-friendly reporting tools can help reduce the burden on individuals and increase efficiency. Providing training and support, offering training sessions, resources and guidance on effective reporting practices can empower individuals to fulfil their reporting responsibilities more efficiently and confidently. Communicating the value of reporting and showing that individuals understand how their reports contribute to organisational goals and decision-making processes can increase motivation and engagement. Encouraging individuals to provide feedback on reporting processes and requirements can help identify areas for improvement and address specific concerns or challenges. By addressing reporting fatigue and optimising reporting processes, organisations can enhance productivity, employee satisfaction, and the overall quality of their reporting practices. Has the council raised the concerns from many residents that there are numerous occasions when they're not getting reference numbers from the EA when reporting complaints, potentially causing residents to suffer from reporting fatigue? Thank you.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of all the councillors who've already spoken on this, including councillors Tagg and Fear when they introduced the very comprehensive report that our officers have prepared for us tonight. I'm aware, as other members are, of how litigious the site operator is, and we are also limited by the code of conduct in what we as councillors are able to say. So I choose my words advisedly. I do not think, and I have said this before in public meetings, I do not think that either the site operator or the regulator, the Environment Agency, should deserve to sleep soundly in their beds and to breathe easy while this poisonous substance is being inflicted on our residents. So that is principally the case for the residents of Silverdale, but we know that it's wider than that. My ward residents were able to smell foul odours this week, and over a very long period of time, a variety of poisonous substances have been administered to an extremely broad population. I'm encouraged to hear that lots of members have got ideas, they're bristling with ideas for different ways in which we can hold people accountable for this, including through judicial review and public inquiry in the future. But the first step is to close the site and to cap it off. That is what our campaigners locally have been calling for, where the slogan has been for years now, stop the stink, cap it off. That is step number one. So I do hope that members will be supportive of the amendment that I'll be moving to the motion, or with my colleague, Councillor Tagg, that we will be moving to make clear that we're not asking for a suspension, we are asking for closure. That is of principal importance to me and to the residents I represent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
For a number of years, the community around Walleys Quarry landfill and further afield have complained about toxic gases from this site. The council served an abatement notice on Walleys Quarry Limited on the 13th of August 2021. The notice required Walleys Quarry Limited to abate the nuisance within 5 months of the date of the notice and to prevent its recurrence. Walleys Quarry lodged an appeal against the notice on the 2nd of September 2021. This started a legal process which took over a year and was concluded through mediation. As a result of the mediation process, the council and Walleys Quarry Limited were able to agree terms for a settlement which enabled Walleys Quarry Limited to withdraw their appeal against the notice. This settlement agreement was ratified in court, making it legally binding. The settlement agreement resulted in the council accepting that the plans and process taken by Walleys Quarry to prevent excessive odours were the best practical means. Essentially, the council agreed that if these plans are followed, it would prevent unacceptable levels of odours occurring. By accepting this in the settlement agreement, the council has accepted that Walleys Quarry is doing everything it can to prevent excessive odours from site. Since the settlement agreement, we have still experienced periods of excessive odours from the site. Given that the council has effectively endorsed Walleys Quarry plans to deal with odours as the best practical means, does the leader of the council accept that the decision to settle the previous abatement notice with the operator was very ill-judged?
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry.
Okay. Cool. Given that a lot of people are reporting increased mental health issues in response to the odours at the site, have the council been in contact with the Health Protection Agency regarding the strain this puts on already overburdened local mental health services? Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers, please? Yeah, Councillor Sweeney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Holland said, actually. You can suspend the license, you can have inquiries, you can do whatever you want, really. But really, the first and foremost is you want to shut the thing down and cap it off. Have the inquiry afterwards, suspend it, do whatever you want. But the first thing is to close it. That's got to be the first aim of everybody in this room, I would think. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the officers of the council for producing this report. I would like to add that I, for the first time probably ever in this chamber, I completely agree with Councillor Holland, and that it's more important to close this down and then take time to sort of for investigations, etc. afterwards. The council has limited powers, as we've already established, but they do have a duty of care towards staff. I would like to ask the leader of the council if they've undertaken any workplace monitoring and health assessments for our employees who regularly work in the immediate vicinity of the site, such as the street scene, cemetery operations, and staff based full-time at the depot.
Councillor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Posi-Shell is a patented blend of clay binders, reinforcing fibres and polymers that, when mixed with water or leachate, produces a spray-applied mortar that dries in the form of a thin, durable layer. Posi-Shell has been used across a number of landfill sites in the USA, with Walleys Quarry being the first landfill site in the UK to adopt this form of daily cover material. One of the main benefits of Posi-Shell is that it can be sprayed over the waste to form a barrier around the waste, avoiding the creation of air pockets or cavities for leachate accumulation. Where Posi-Shell has been used in the USA, it's been reported to provide a suitable method for covering of waste, providing a layer to capture and reduce leachate alongside odours. Whilst the use of Posi-Shell should be advantageous compared to traditional soil covers, in the case of Walleys Quarry, this has been largely ineffective in dealing with both odours from the waste and leachate. Furthermore, the company that produces Posi-Shell also produces a sister product known as Odour Shell. This product is specifically produced to be mixed with Posi-Shell and provides a number of odour filters and neutralisers that have received strong support from across communities in the USA. Therefore, given that Posi-Shell has universally been recognised as a failure by all, how are we going to have any confidence in the capping off work undertaken to date, given it is now showing signs of degradation? And why has the EA not forced the operator to use Odour Shell to help filter and neutralise odours from the site? Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers, please? Right, we'll go Councillor Wilden.
Thank you.
You put your mic on, please.
Have done. The real miscreant here is Walleys Quarry. The aide de complice is the Environment Agency. They're the only ones who can actually act and stop this and actually close them down. The council as a whole have done their utmost. And if you look at item 7 on this report, which is absolutely brilliant and is the start of the resident and council war against this happening and making them close it off and close it down, just shows what the council have done to date within the restrictions that are forced upon them. The only one able to act is the Environment Agency. They're the ones that gave the false readings. They're now hiding behind those false readings and saying that there's a lack of accurate data, whether it's gas or toxic emissions or just smell. Even the complaints data, I know, I represent Thistlebury. I live in Geneva Drive, a few hundred yards away from the Kiel roundabout. I know what the smell is like. I live with it with the rest of you. Even the complaints data is not accurate because Many suffer from complaints exhaustion. I do myself. You get to a point where you think, I've complained, nothing's happened. What's the point? So you can't just rely on that data and say, oh, there's only been so many complaints. There is an underlying probably 2/3, rather like an iceberg, that is hiding below that, where people don't actually put something in writing. They feel that nothing's happening. We all do. The only way we can do this and actively stop it, because when we've tried looking at all the things we've done in item 7, and I ask everybody to have a look at that, Walleys Quarry buy time. I've worked in the court system. I used to buy time myself when you wanted to put something off. Don't let them buy time. Close it down, make the Environment Agency close it down, and then let them fight to open it up again and do what they're supposed to do.
No, thank you. Can be quiet. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Compliance Classification Scheme is a framework used by regulatory agencies such as environmental protection agencies to assess the catalogue of compliance performed of regular entities, such as industrial facilities or waste management sites. The scheme typically involves evaluating the compliance history of these entities, such as on factors such as adherence to environmental regulations, permit conditions, reporting requirements, and any enforcement action taken against them. The Compliance Classification Scheme aims to promote transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement in environmental performance by providing a structural way to assess the communicate compliance levels. Depending on the specific scheme, implementation of regulatory agency and entities will be classified into different categories based on the compliance record, such as fully compliant, partially compliant, or non-compliant. These classifications may have implications for the level of regulatory oversight, enforcement actions to assess, provide, and the entities to improve compliance. Overall, the compliance classification scheme, such as a tool for regulatory agencies to monitor and sensitize compliance with environmental regulations, protect public health and the environment, and ensure a level playing field for all regulatory entities. Since 2021, Walleys Quarry have been consistently rated in compliance band F, the lowest level of compliance rating by the Environment Agency. Given that the operator fails to comply with the permit, you can expect the Environment Agency to serve a closure notice, giving the consistent track of non-compliance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Adcock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's become very clear the situation at Walleys Quarry is deteriorating rapidly. The operator and the regulator seem to have lost all control over the odour emissions, with readings consistently above 20% and above annoyance threshold, and a putrid smell lingering over Silverdale and the surrounding areas on a daily basis. Residents have not had enough clarity over the long-term health effects of breathing this stuff in, and the health risk assessments are all currently in major doubt. We also can't ignore the mental health impacts, and I speak from personal experience on this. The utter helplessness and the shame you feel by not being able to have clean air for your family is utterly devastating. I used to work in Bradwell as a primary teacher, and trying to teach 7 and 8-year-olds in a classroom filled with gas and trying to get them to concentrate and be able to do their work when you know that they're being gradually overtaken by this gas is just devastating. Children and residents with health conditions have especially suffered. Given all this impact, Walleys should have been issued with a closure notice years ago. Nevertheless, the EA assured residents they would step in and manage the situation, and they've had a huge amount of time to do so. But given the awful winter we've experienced with odour, The fact that the data the EA have been using has all been proven wrong, which has been based their entire operation on, and the fact the site sits in Band F for non-compliance for a third consecutive year proves the EA's whole strategy has failed. So I think we need to go further than calling for a suspension of permit. This site needs an immediate closure notice. I also agree with the calls for a public inquiry to be held to investigate the massive failings that have occurred here, and public hearings to hear from residents who have been affected, as often we're looking at data on spreadsheets where we really need to hear from residents and the real impacts that it's had on them. We won't give up on lobbying the government on this, with more Minister for Waste visiting next week. There are various petitions going around that I encourage residents to sign. I also encourage people to write letters of complaint if you think the Environment Agency has not done a good job, which it has not. And finally, I'd like to say that it's just a very sad situation. And we really need to send a stronger possible signal that the EA has all the tools at its disposal. It's the only agency that can immediately and quickly solve this crisis. And the council has done a sterling job using its very limited power, but ultimately it's up to the Environment Agency now to step up and prove that they can do their job and protect residents.
Thank you. Councillor Fox-Hewitt. Any more?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just basically going through a bit of a timeline. As long as I've been on the council, this has been a problem. And obviously, the new EA format was looking quite good. But coming recently, just coming up to the 21st of August in 2023, obviously the EA came out and issued a problem, realising that the calibration was not of standard to the analyzer. Going down forward to the 1st of September, additional analyzers were put into MF9, which were checked and calibrated following advice from the manufacturer. Might have been a good idea to do that the first time, actually, but there we go. This allowed EA to collect data for sufficient time to understand an impact of the issue. On the 21st of September, the EA concluded that they could not actually give, for any kind of degree of certainty, any kind of data that would be of any use and would not estimate. So we then go on to the 19th of October, when an calibrated H2S analyzer went into MF1 and MF2. Actually, this time it was calibrated correctly, we hope, hopefully. These results obtained would give them the process where the EA had sufficient confidence and raw data to be recorded and to restart publishing data from MF1 and MF2. The EA have developed a method that could allow historic H2S data to be taken and an independent peer review. This was anticipated to be finalised by the end of January 2024. Come the 14th of February, we have not received any of this. So can we ask when this may become available to the public? Thank you very much.
Councillor Panther.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to speak on the medical effects of this, but Councillor Jones, Councillor Adcock and Councillor Beckley-Smith have covered that very well, so there's no need for me to comment any further. I just hope we don't get any more need for it.
Please. No, Councillor Tagg, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you. And I think we've had there that full debate, haven't we? I think more members spoke on this than I've ever spoke on it. I think the passion that people have got for this, the experiences they've got of being living in the affected areas or living further afield. Because of course, one thing that Councillor White said, Councillor Gary White, is that, you know, it's not just living around the quarry, it's many miles away. As well, whether you're in Westbury Park, whether you're in Maybank, whether you're in Port Hill, Bradwell, down through the town, over into Stoke, up to Madeley, you know, feeling the effects of this. And I'm just so disheartened that since there was some improvement, let's admit there was some improvement, but since, you know, November time, I'm now getting, you know, residents in the top end of Westlands and Seabridge complaining about the odours again, who haven't had to complain about it for 2 years. So going awry. I'll try to answer as many of the questions as I can. There was a lot there, but I think our officers are covering a lot off what has been said. But I think just on the POSI shell issued by Councillor Moss, I think I almost chuckled when I heard Posy shall mention, I think a lot of residents remember this, the miracle cure for a landfill site. It failed miserably, didn't it? And I think what Councillor Moss needs to understand is when we say capping, we mean a membrane putting across there, we mean soil putting over it, and also draw-offs for the gas, because there'll always be gas in there, and it needs to be managed over a period. It's going to be managed for 40 years after it closes. So I think proper capping is not some whizzy thing from America. It's actually good old-fashioned plastic membrane and soil, which is a great way of capping a landfill. And we need to do that on the entire site. That's what the EA should be ordering in their closure notice. Councillor Brockie, yes, completely agree with you on the site. You know, they've already removed, we had four, didn't we? Removed to 3. And then obviously the issues at the pump station in Silverdale meant that the 3rd one was taken away. At a cabinet meeting, which you know, you could have viewed online, Councillor Brockie, and is available for anybody to view, we did ask our officers to chase up with the EA when they were going to reinstate that 3rd one, and we wanted to reinstate it in a place that would be of benefit for the owners. And I believe they haven't announced it yet, but there is a place, and our officers are pressing for them to announce that. So we will have the 3 monitoring stations back, hopefully calibrated correctly and hopefully switched on, which has not been the case in some times by this awful Environment Agency. So schools, I think it was Councillor, forget the council, yes, from Bradwell, who forgotten your name, who actually Leslie Richards, thank you, who mentioned about the schools. Of course, it was St Giles, St George's School, and also St Mary's on Silverdale Road. And our MP has raised that with the Secretary of State, if you remember. I think we all know about that probably more because our MP has taken up the fight on that. And I think it's really disgraceful that lessons are being disrupted. I know they had also a minor gas leak, which was nothing to do with the quarry, and I believe the gas people came out and sorted that out. But again, over a long period, those schools in the local area, not just there, but on the other side of it in Silverdale, even as far afield as in Keele as well, have suffered. You know, children are in a closed environment for a long period, and they have to suffer that. That's just not good enough. I think on the issue to do with the calling the EA and making sure that their phone lines, I think it was Councillor Rees, was it, who said that? I think our officers are listening to that, and they will take that on board to ensure that, you know, I've seen some comments on social media where they're being abruptly spoken to on the phone when reporting this. That's not good enough. This Environment Agency pays these people to look after the concerns of local people, and we'll certainly be following that one up as well. I think on the issue of the public inquiry versus judicial review, I'll just go, and it was Councillor Stubbs that started off, seemed a long time ago now, but he did. I think I'll just refer you to the report that our officer has give on a judicial review and the limitations of a judicial review, that it actually just asks the decision maker to look at the decision again if they feel it's not been done in the correct way. Now, if we're asking a minister to look at the decision again, that's one thing. But when we're asking the EA to consider, as in this case, it's a closure notice, a suspension notice, as you're asking in the Labour motion, it would seem to me that if they follow the correct steps, then we come to the end where they make the same decision again, and they will defend this, they will appeal this, and it will go on forever. So what we want in the motion, the amendment which has been put forward to the motion by people on this side of the chamber, is that we look into that in more detail. But we call again for what I believe is the thing we need is the public inquiry, which will be a drains up, drill down, whatever you want it, of everything that's gone on around here, past and present at the EA. They've got a new chief executive now. The other one's just walked away, hasn't he? He was too busy trying to stop councillors mentioning issues about this Walleys quarry and taking them through the standards board rather than actually doing anything about it. At the time when the calibration of the equipment was incorrect and was off, why wasn't he looking into that? We've had the area director who's now moved away somewhere else. I think it was Councillor Fear that said there's that constant churn, you know, and then somebody else comes on and say, not my problem, mate. So that's not good enough neither. And a judicial public inquiry will sort that issue out, and we demand that, and we deserve that. If this is in the southeast of England, what would they have done? If this is in London, what would they have done? They would have had a public inquiry by now. Why not here? So Let's have that. But I think my last thing I would say, we're going to go on to the motions now. I would ask when the Labour leader, Councillor Jones, obviously puts forward his amendment, it does say in there, puts forward his motion. In his motion, his group are calling for that suspension. We are amending that to say that suspension isn't good enough. We need to close this quarry down and start the process of ending this. And I would ask him if he will support this amendment, and we can all move forward on that basis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. The recommendations have been moved and seconded, so we now move on to the vote on this. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Yes. Aye, please. Thank you. Yeah, it's unanimous. Members, the next substantive item of business is motions of members. A copy of a motion concerning suspension of the operating licence at Walleys Quarry can be found on pages 25 to 27 of your agenda. The motion has been proposed by Councillor David Jones and seconded by Councillor Andrew Fox-Hewitt. An amendment to this motion has been proposed by Councillor Simon Tagg and seconded by Councillor Mark Holland. This can be found on pages 29 and 30 of your agenda. We will hear from the proposer and seconder of the original motion first, and then the proposer and seconder of the amendment will be invited to speak. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak on your motion, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I formally move this motion, I would like to notify the mover and seconder of the amendment that I would be happy to accept an amendment to this motion that removes reference of suspension of permit and replaces that with closure notice. I would be more than happy to accept that right now. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move this motion in the hope that we as a council, who so many times have had to step up and protect our residents against these gases, can once again force those who are responsible for regulation and protection to act. My colleague, Councillor Fox-Hewitt, will overview the motion when he seconds, so I want to focus on the main points of this motion. These are securing authorisation from all councillors to undertake 2 judicial reviews. 1, to review the decision by the EA not to cease and close the licence at Walleys Quarry following over 90 breaches of the permit and demonstrable harm to local residents. 2, to review the decision by the Secretary of State not to hold a public inquiry into the failings of the Environment Agency, including, though not limited to, their inability to use legislative powers to enforce the permit at Walleys Quarry and protect local residents. I thank the monitoring officer for his comments on the feasibility of the judicial review. I note from his section in the report that one barrier to proceeding with such a review is if the complainant has not sought relief through other potential avenues, and note that he has stated that we have used those options. If we are to take the first judicial review, we must demonstrate that the EA have indeed taken a decision not to close the licence and done so in convention of regulations and policies at their disposal. Regulation of permits subject to the Environmental Permitting England and Wales Regulations 2016 statutory instrument. Within this SI, section 37 states the regulator may suspend or close an environmental permit by serving a notice on the operator under this regulation. If the regulator considers that the operation of a regulated facility or environmental permit involves a risk of serious pollution or a risk of serious harm to the environment. The legal definition of environmental harm is covered by the Environmental Protection Act of 1990, subsequently amended, where environment is defined as consists of all or any of the following media, namely air, water, land, and harm, get ready for this, is defined as means harm to the health of living organisms or interference, or in the case of man, includes offence caused to any senses or harm to property. I think it's a pretty cast iron definition there. Taking this into consideration, we can clearly evidence that the breaches of the permit through inability to control the emission of these gases meets the threshold for environmental harm. The Act further defines the enforcing authority as the Environment Agency, acting on behalf of the Secretary of State, which we may revisit later. The Environment Agency Enforcement and Sanctions Policy clearly states that their decision on permit sanctions must seek to put right environmental harm or damage and eliminate the risk posed to people and the environment and the impact on the environment, people and businesses. Further, they are required to be consistent with their use of powers, including any suspension or closure of license. We cite one example of suspension of a permit on a landfill site, Bryn Posteg in Wales, where the breaches were very similar to some of those we have seen at Walleys. There are further examples, such as the suspension of the permit at Bladen landfill for non-compliance over excessive odours. I think we meet that. And also Thackwood Material Recycling Facility, who had their permit suspended for storing non-hazardous waste in the wrong location. Not tipping, storing. The list goes on,
1 minute,
yet
Councillor
no
Jones.
meaningful action at Walleys. Taking this into consideration, we can see that their decision on making sanctions following permit breaches by the operator has been flawed outside of their own policy, that the continual decisions in place over the 90 breaches of the permit have not been entirely compliant with their own policy by failing to protect environment, residents, businesses. Given the previous cited failings by the EA to appropriately regulate the permit at Walleys Quarry, the recent evidence from monitoring stations evidencing environmental harm as defined by the Act, and lack of proportional response given the evidence of permit suspension or closure at other facilities, it's clear that ministers' decisions not to hold a public inquiry is on false pretenses. And thus, given the extent of fact, they may choose to vary their decision, thus passing the threshold for a judicial review. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Fox-Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is my intention. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do second the motion tabled as part of our specially convened meeting on the issue of Walleys Quarry tonight. It would be remiss if I didn't just refer to Councillor Tagg's opening remarks and his usual adversarial comments about the motive for calling this meeting tonight. That the meeting was in response to a meeting that was held by Council on the 24th of January, where there were no proposals to deal with Walleys Quarry, save for a single solitary line that called for a contingency fund should officers deem it necessary. Well, we are very clear tonight that the time is now. Now, the council has, to give it credit amongst all members, over the past few years, explored a number of options at resolving the blight that this landfill brings to our communities in our town. And it's done so with a common consensus amongst us all. But it is undeniable that despite the promises of the operator to work with the council, to work with residents, to work with the Environment Agency, that the situation has not improved. The assertion is supported by the data that's been gathered by air monitoring and by the number of complaints that we see in the reports before us. This site has had in excess, as has been said, 90 permit breaches since 2019, is yet again rated in compliance band F. Now, the trouble is, each time a breach is found, warnings are given, remedial action is instructed by the regulator, but no sooner as they are remedied, another breach is already found. Every time. And all that time, despite the protests, despite the council's abatement notice, despite the local, regional and national press, which really suffers the reputation of our town, despite the parliamentary debates, still this site dominates the lives of our communities. We cannot go on like this. We have a regulator who cannot say whether the hydrogen sulfide emissions are a danger to health. We have a UK health agency refusing to investigate, and we have a government refusing to step in. That's why the Labour group have called this meeting tonight and have tabled the recommendations. So I'll summarise those recommendations. They propose a number of things. that this council is unequivocal that the people of Newcastle under Lyme are living with a significant public health emergency. That council hears from residents and communities who put us here to be their voice. That council demands that the EA close the site as amended. That the Environment Agency do their job and publish the data that it is charged with providing the people. That council uses the process of a judicial review to force those charged with protecting the health and security of citizens to do so. And that council agrees to use its financial resources taken from these people that pay their council tax to use it for that. We do not want to leave here tonight without having committed to firm action that will deliver results for the people of this borough. And I'll close by saying we seek no indemnities for ourselves. We have exercised a patience, forbearance, which would otherwise have been possible had it not been for a misplaced trust in those charged with protecting the health and safety of our communities. Now is the time for us to all unite behind a common goal, rid ourselves once and for all of this vandalism of our environment and our health. Please support the motion. I move.
Councillor Simon Tagg, would you like to propose your amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I really would. And I really welcome, a partial sort of admission that they got their motion wrong originally and calling for a suspension. I think everybody would agree. Well, suspension versus, what do you want, suspension or closure? They're looking for suspension in their original motion. We want
Order,
please.
please.
Simple as that.
Order, carry on.
Yeah, simple as that.
Be
So
quiet,
we welcome.
I'll ask you one more time, either you leave or you keep your mouth closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if you obviously let me finish, obviously we welcome then that we're now all united on a closure notice. And we're all with you. No.
Can we just hold? Appreciate. Okay, I appreciate this is a really emotive issue. Please don't. No, emotive. Please allow the council to continue, and allow the council to continue.
Councillor Jones.
Can members of the public please listen? I completely acknowledge the long campaign you have put. I have been asked to speak by the mayor. We long acknowledge the long fight that you as campaigners have taken. We completely acknowledge that and completely respect you and everything you've done. We are here to fight alongside you and enable you as much as possible. The problem is, if you keep interrupting, the mayor will eject the public audience. We don't want that to happen because we want you to hear everything. But please allow the mayor to just conduct the meeting. I say this as somebody who does live with these smells as well. I know what you're going through.
We all do. We all do, God's sake.
We've just had an hour and a half conversation about this with all members being involved, even the public gallery also coming in as well. And I think we're all on one side here, and that is to stop this bloody stink, isn't it? That's causing distress to thousands of people. So really pleased that the amendment issue to do with 3 has been adopted. But unfortunately, we're going to have to move, number 5 particularly needs to change because, as I said in my initial remarks, I'm sure people will agree this if they think about it, we should be focusing as a council within our powers on resolving the odour from Walleys Quarry with the abatement notice process, which I said is ongoing, okay? So we need to do that, not at this stage an open-ended commitment to judicial review without any legal advice. So we want to seek that legal advice and bring that back. That doesn't stop the abatement notice process going forward. It doesn't stop us calling for closure. And I think, Councillor Foxhew is always comes across as the person that's attacking. The person that's been attacking in this meeting is him. And I'll tell you why. Listen to me, I'll tell you why. He said at the meeting of the 5th, there wasn't an opportunity to discuss Walleys Quarry. It was actually on the agenda. You've had your say, let me have my say. On the agenda was about the Cabinet's decision, that group of councillors, as I said, calling on the EA to close the Walleys Quarry and to cap it off and do all the other things we talked about. That was discussed. We had a half an hour, members, didn't we? Discussion, everybody coming in from all sides. And then in a couple of hours, we get this amendment calling for this motion calling for this meeting. So I'm sorry, number 5, we keep to our amendment to the motion. And it does say all the things that Andrew Fox-Hewitt said in his remarks about, the odours emanating from Walleys Quarry are providing significant risk. We agree that. We ask for the scrutiny committee to hold a public hearing, scrutiny committees hold a public hearing, which will allow the public to give views, will allow stakeholders, businesses, operators, get the bodies such as the county council, the local health bodies and the EA into the room as well to discuss that. And we want that to happen as well. We're calling for that closure notice. We all agree that now. And we're asking for the Environment Agency to publish that data as well. Now, there was one question I didn't cover originally when we discussed the report, and that is, when are we going to hear? I think it was one of the councillors on the Labour side. When on earth are we going to hear? I think it was from Chesterton, Councillor Grocott. And this is absolutely ridiculous. We were told it was going to be early January. We were told it was going to be the end of January. We were told it was going to be beginning of February. And understand now it may not be till March that we actually get that recalibrated data, which is not good enough. So our officers have made that pretty plain in the various meetings that they have with the EA, and we should reaffirm that tonight. But we want that data so we can assess. And then the health agencies can look at it and say, has there been a significant health risk? And from there, public inquiry needs to be called immediately. But we don't know that until we have that data. We wait for that. And then 5 is that we do concentrate that energies. This council we're talking about here, it's about the EA, talking about MPs, talking about people that want to be MPs. What we're talking about is this council should, as people are always texting me about on X or X, Twitter or Facebook, about what are you going to do about this abatement notice? Well, this is about the abatement notice. We need to focus on that. But we also need to ask our legal officer to look into a judicial review and bring back, because as he says in his report, it's not as clear cut and it's not the golden bullet, the golden target which we want to go for. That would, I believe, be that public inquiry, which I think everybody here who doesn't want a public inquiry in this room? Nobody. We all want a public inquiry and we're all going to press for that. Our MPs, parliamentary candidates, former councillors, present councillors, councillors from the county council, Councillor Hookfield's here as well, all want to see that and people held to account. So that's our amendment. And we also are obviously asking for reports back through the various council committees to get a view on a potential judicial review as well. So we're not losing that one, we're just asking for that. So hopefully people can support that. I move the amendment.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have pleasure in seconding the amendment that Councillor Tagg has moved. It is a tragedy that we are still here having this conversation. We really ought to be further along by now. And I wish most strongly to say how much I don't want to disagree with what the proposer and seconder of the motion said, because when we disagree, that makes the site operators happy. That makes the people who are responsible for this farrago happy. It pleases them when we are disunited as a community, and I don't want to see that. I want to pay tribute to everyone in the audience tonight who is not a member of this council and therefore doesn't have speaking rights, who has been campaigning for years on this. I want to pay tribute to the representatives of some of the political parties that I can see who are passionate about this and who are spectating in the public gallery. Now, I'm clear that the big thing for me was that we wanted to change it from saying suspension to closure. When I first read the motion as it was proposed, the title of it, not just the call, the title of it was to suspend. I'm delighted that we can speak as one voice on that. We are going to press our amendment, and I would encourage, in proposing that amendment, the proposer and seconder of the motion to accept it so we don't have to go to a vote. because again, I'd like us to speak with one voice. If there is one thing I could change about the way in which this has been organised this evening, I would have liked to have seen some behind the scenes dialogue between the council, administration and the opposition to formulate a text on which we could all agree. It may not be a perfect text, but I think that the amendment does good things. It strengthens this motion. It gives us an opportunity to create a forum in which the public can be put first, not us. So this full council meeting is a demonstration of how councillors are having their say and members of the public not so much. But scrutiny, and I speak as a scrutiny chair, scrutiny is empowered to create an environment, a public hearing in which those members of the public can be put first. And that's why I'm supporting the amendment. I'm supporting the leader in calling for that release of data that will and can result in a public inquiry. I'm supporting an amendment that will enable us to get the advice we need, the legal advice, to pursue judicial reviews in the right way. I'm aware of all of the limitations that our monitoring officer has outlined to us. I do not rule it out. I am very disappointed that both the Secretary of State and the Shadow Minister on his visit recently to Newcastle have both apparently ruled out a public inquiry. I don't think we should be ruling that out. We've got to speak with one voice. I encourage members opposite to support whatever the text is at the end of this process, because we must speak with one voice. We must cap it off. We've got to stop it right now, and then we can move on in all of these other different ways to hold the people responsible accountable, which is the next step. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Fox-Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it
Councillor
was.
Fox-Hewitt, do you agree to the amendment?
I'm going to go through. I thought it would assist, Mr. Mayor, if I go through the amendments and let the administration or the mover and the seconder know which ones are accepted and which ones are not.
Thank you.
Thank you. So unfortunately, they haven't highlighted where the amendments are, but I can go through them. Some of this is a bit dry. So on the front page, para 1 is they've inserted in relation to Walleys Quarry. The group accept that amendment. Para 2, they've included this before council. We accept that amendment. In para 3, they've changed Environment Agency to EA. We accept that amendment, even though it's semantics. The inclusion of the Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reid, apparently not supporting a public inquiry. We don't accept that inclusion. For clarity, Mr. Reid actually stated in response to that question that he made clear the people of Newcastle under Lyme need answers and action now, not in any protracted process, and that given that government and Mr. Ball were refusing to support the public inquiry, he suggested it may be more expedient for the people of Newcastle under Lyme to use, as an example, the Office of the Public Advocate as a means of learning what has gone wrong and who bears responsibility. But he did not rule out a public inquiry. He simply couldn't understand how we're in this situation. Now, I don't know if you've seen Councillor Tagg, but the commencement of this meeting, due to the comments and inclusion on the motion that the leader has tabled, Steve Reid, OBE MP, who's the Shadow Secretary for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, he's written to Steve Barclay, Secretary of State Government, and he's published a letter at the commencement of this meeting. Would you like me to read that out so you can reconsider whether that inclusion? No, it's the accuracy of the motion. Okay. He doesn't want to retract it despite it being false. The next amendment. Yep.
Is that better? Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Fox-Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next amendment is the inclusion of "for far too long" after odours emanating. The group accept that amendment. The next one is the inclusion of the council note. The report notes the council's cabinet decision, which called for the A to consider a closure notice. Despite it not actually saying that, it says be encouraged. We do accept that amendment in the spirit of consensus. The next one is that full council asks relevant scrutiny committee to hold a public hearing. We have some trouble with that one because this meeting that we proposed called for a full council meeting. Now, that's important because scrutiny committees are somewhat abridged. There's only a short number of members. Walleys Quarry impacts every single member in this council. We also want a full public access meeting for the public so that they can hold us to account. So we don't think that a scrutiny committee is the proper way. So we would ask for that to be withdrawn. And I'm nearly at the end of them now. The next one is that council endorses the decision to
Mr. Mayor, I can save him the time if you want, and everybody's time here, because we're not accepting anything that they say. We've got our amendment, which we're moving forward, which calls for closure,
I've nearly finished.
calls for more inquiry, calls for more legal advice on a J.
This is quite important.
And also, we cannot go through word for word now, can we? This is, people want to see how we're going to vote. I think it'd be quite, politics has been brought into this by Councillor Fox-Hewitt. It's quite clear, it's quite clear when we quote the BBC's website about what the Secretary of State said.
Councillor Fox-Hewitt, you've got 15 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The most important one is about the closure notice. So we've accepted that. However, we have got an amendment because the closure notice on its own, it needs to be in conjunction with an agreed plan to remedy the site. It's about restoring the site, and that needs to be with partners and agencies so that when we shut it, we're not left with this hellhole for years to come. So we've got an amendment that we think works in conjunction with what you've proposed, and in the spirit of getting this done properly, that's what we move. And then the very last one, the last line is the 300,000. We object to that. Council agreed last year to £1 million in a fund. You remove that. The council agreed it, you removed it. Let's put it back to £1 million so that everybody knows this council means business. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, do you consent to the amendment, please?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where I am on this. So I consent to the amendment that Councillor Fox-Hewitt has proposed. I do not consent to the amendment that Councillor Tagg and Councillor Holland have proposed. And I'm assuming this isn't my time to speak on it as the mover of the original motion, or do you want me to call in again?
It's actually fine. Members, there is no agreement to amend the original motion, so we must now debate and take a vote on whether or not to amend the original motion. Do any members wish to speak on the proposed amendment, please? Councillor Tagg.
Yeah, I think, I'm being passed bits of paper here about things that, amending to the amendment. I think we're going to stick with our original amendment to the motion. I'll just correct Councillor. People probably don't realise this, but it says we took away the £1 million out of the reserve. We actually spent £1 million on the abatement notice process to get where we are at the moment. That is the truth of the matter. So it's not as if we've withdrawn the money, it's been spent. And that's why we should be focusing on the abatement notice. I would ask people in the public gallery who are here with an open mind, whether they wish us to pursue the abatement notice or go off on a tangent on a JR without getting the actual full details. That's my concern. That's why we cannot support the original motion put forward by Labour or any of these hybrid monster amendments they've just put forward, and why we want to press ahead and move to a vote on our amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Do any members wish to speak on the proposed amendment, please? Councillor Adcock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think most residents are interested in the back and forth. I think we should just stick to what the issues are here. Number one, in the amendments, it represents a significant public health emergency. Yes, we all know that it does. Asking the scrutiny committees to hold a public hearing. Yes, we all want a public hearing. We all now agree that we want a closure notice. That's a given. We want the Environment Agency to publish all their health data. Yes, absolutely. It's already past time that they've done so. They've already missed several deadlines. We all agree on that. The actual differences between these motions are quite small. Number 5, our amendment thinks that we should focus on the abatement notice process and ask our monitoring officer to then take the appropriate legal advice before we commit to judicial review. That's not ruling out judicial review. That's just saying we need to have appropriate advice first before we commit officers' time and council resources to it. But we should really focus on what we can do quickly using our limited powers of the abatement notice to get this issue resolved. Number 6, the monitoring officer's advice is referred to scrutiny committees. Yes, we can all agree to that. And number 7, we proposed £300,000. Labour Group proposed £1 million. In the end, if the Environment Agency did its job, we wouldn't need that money anyway. If the Environment Agency will close the site like it should, we hopefully won't need to spend that amount of taxpayers' money. In any case, if it does come to that, which we hope it really doesn't, then we can come back at full council at the right time, and I'm sure we can all agree to allocate further funds. But I don't think the differences between these two motions are hugely significant. I think really that the Labour Group should have come to us and we could have developed this motion together rather than submit a motion and us finding out on social media. I think it should have been done with the party leaders together, because I don't think most residents are interested in this back and forth. I think we should just get behind the amendment and we should vote it through.
Any more speakers, please? Councillor Wheeldon, then Councillor.
I'm a resident of Thistlebury Ward. I'm affected, probably not as badly as some, but I am affected on a daily, weekly basis. I want it closed. I want it stopped. I want all the things that are listed on page 30. I want all of those. And I don't think any politician, councillor would disagree with that. What you have to understand, and it's nothing to do with politics per se, there is an order of doing things. Every step of the way has a cost attached to it. If you have a public inquiry, the officers have to act. There is a fee attached to that. If you have an abatement notice, there is a fee attached to that. I've worked in that professional industry, and it just is. If you go to a solicitor to get a will, you have to pay. So for every step of the way, there is a fee. There is a fee attached to it. It might not be an open fee. It might be the time of an officer carrying out the process. It might be a group of officers carrying out the process, but there is a fee attached to it. And there is an order of doing things. You get things out of order, and whatever you've applied for will be kicked out. So get it right first time. That minimizes the cost and gives you the greatest opportunity of success.
Have you finished, Councillor Wheeldon? Thank you. Councillor Betley-Smith, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Adcock made absolutely, totally clear what we need to do and the reasons why we need to do it. So all I want to do is totally support him, and I think we should be voting on this amendment, which I think is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers, please? Councillor Fear.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't understand why the Labour Party aren't voting for this amendment. It does everything Councillor Fox-Hewitt said. It will bring results and it will get them here. What on earth are we getting worked up about a judicial review for? How many people? Everybody said this is a wonderful report that we had in our last item. How many people have read Section 8? Look at 8.3. If a judicial review is successful, the court will not substitute what it thinks is the correct decision. This may mean that the public body will be able to make the same decision again, so long as it does so in a lawful way. In other words, this isn't about the rights and wrongs. Don't kid yourself. This is about process. And these people with their weasel words will happily say, okay, terribly sorry, our decision, we shouldn't have done A, B, and C, but actually, if we'd legally done D and F, we'd come to the same decision. So in fact, this is a complete distraction. We should be getting on with what we can do. Now, another thing, rather than that, as well as the terms of reference of this thing, it'll be about process. It won't be about the rights and wrongs of it. The interesting one is the public inquiry. Why do people not want the public inquiry? Because then the skeletons will come out the cupboard. And that's the different thing. But you won't get it with a judicial review. So let's not be distracted. Let's get stuck in. Let's do the best for this borough. And again, as Councillor Adcock said, with the money, it's nobody saying the money isn't there. We're saying the money will be there. When we need it, we can have a vote on it. So what's the problem? Why is the Labour Party, if they want results, why are they getting so worked up? It's absolutely incomprehensible. It's just balmy.
Any more speakers, please? Councillor Moss.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted. Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to clarify if we could speak on the motion. I'm just checking whether we can speak on the motion. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will there be opportunity to speak later? Will there be opportunity to speak later? Yes. Okay, I just want to clarify that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Let's clarify where we are in the proceedings. So the most recent set of discussions have been about the Conservative amendment to the Labour motion. In a moment, there will be an opportunity to have a vote on whether or not that amendment is supported or whether it's not supported. If the amendment is supported, then the amended motion becomes the substantive motion, which would then be debated. If it's not supported, then the original motion submitted by Labour will remain, and we have a supplementary amendment to that we would then be in a position to debate. But that only happens if the Conservative amendment isn't supported. So the next thing the Mayor will the next speakers that the Mayor will invite to speak will be the mover of the substantive motion, and then Councillor Tagg to sum up, and then there will be a vote on whether or not to adopt the Conservative amendment. Thanks. Just I thought it'd be useful just to be clear on that.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think what we've had is a brief debate on the amendment itself. I made it very clear that we are willing to make steps to meet in the middle. We are willing to change. We have already agreed that we will change suspension to closure notice. My colleague, Councillor Fox-Hewitt, ran through the majority of the amendments and was willing to accept most of them. However, we do have two red lines that we're not willing to cross on this, and therefore would struggle to accept the amendment if the original movers of that amendment are unwilling to budge on that. Like everyone else here, we want action now. We don't want action 6 months from now. We don't want action 3 years from now. How many times have we come together in this chamber, walked away with the promise of action, and yet nothing has happened? We are seeing the situation, if not get worse, certainly not get any better. And therefore, my concern with the amendment is that the original motion commits very clearly that we as a council authorise the administration to undertake 2 judicial reviews. Now, I've heard a lot about judicial reviews being a waste of time. Let us remember it was a judicial review that prevented the proroguing of Parliament. It was a judicial review that enforced ministers to enact Clean Air Acts, which is why we've got the problem on Basford Bank. It is currently a judicial review that is being heard against the Environment Agency over their failure to protect the residents and the River Wye from pollution being dumped into it. Judicial reviews can work and they can bring very rapid direct action. Now, this amendment, the two red lines, first of all, it commits to us doing something sometime down the line, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year. No commitment whatsoever to direct action. I cannot remove the element of the motion that commits us tonight, if we were to vote the original motion through tonight, to say to our legal officer who is sat up there, you can do 2 judicial reviews as of tonight. That's a commitment I'm not willing to give up. The second commitment, and it's gone slightly under the radar on this, and I'm a bit concerned that in debating the amendment that the administration hasn't covered this. Our second red line is that £1 million legal support fund. We said last year at the Budget Council meeting, it was lunacy to not restore that to the £1 million level. Absolute lunacy. And look where we are now. We could use that money in that budget more than ever. At the moment, we have a measly commitment of a third of that sum. When you talk about we have spent that money, yes, we spent 400k. By my rough accounting, there's another 600k after that, and I'm not sure where that's gone. So on top of that, we're getting money back from the operator, which I've asked many times, is that money going into that legal support fund? Because that's where it should be going. I think it is very fair, considering this is a small district council that's about to oversee multi-million-pound building projects in the town centre, that we can commit £1 million to residents' health. I think that's an easy commitment. So I'm afraid I cannot support the amendment without those firm commitments to action now, tonight, and ring fencing that £1 million legal fund.
Councillor Tagg, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're going to obviously vote in a minute on this amendment, which is obviously stronger than the motion that was put forward by the Labour group, and that is for that closure. They misjudged, didn't they, tonight by saying that we should suspend. It should be suspended, it should be closed, and it should be capped off. And it should be, because when you close it, it sets a, we don't need to add anything to this, Councillor Fox-Hewitt. When it's closed, it sets off a series of events which will lead to the capping and the restoration of this site. So I'm quite happy with a closure notice, because it's a legal requirement and what happens. So when it comes to the JR, I think looking back to the original motion, why we've amended it is because it sets out 2 possible routes for JR, and then asks for the officers to go away and procure legal, obviously, advice on that. We're actually just asking for that legal advice to come back to council, so we can then have that legal advice before we make a decision to possibly put over £1 million into a judicial review. When we need to pursue the abatement notice, we could be over £1 million to take that through to its legal conclusion. As for this difference between 300, 600 or £1 million, council reserves are set up to be, overall, we've got £4.5 million reserves in this council. They are actually put into different segments, but what we do have is a general reserve. And we are told by the auditors that we must keep a level of a general reserve when we set a budget. After this meeting is concluded, we're going to set the budget later, and we're going to ensure that the initial 300,000 is in there to progress the abatement notice. And if there is any requirement there for extra money, to come back to this council and to vote it through as part of the process. We did that when we originally went for the abatement notice and also for the appeal and the fight for the abatement notice. And it worked well then. Members made the decision. They had all the information in front of them. We don't have the information in front of us on this JR at the moment. And as I think the opposition just said, Councillor Jones, we are a small council. We are engaged in multi-million pound regeneration as well. And we're also, I've spent £1 million on this abatement notice. We are getting some money back monthly as part of the arrangement to the costs which were initially put in. But we put a significant amount of money into this. And as I say, the process is continuing behind the scenes. Our officers can't talk about it, or else that does down the case which the council is putting forward. But constantly, our officers are out there with communities, even just this last weekend, talking to residents who are reporting the smell, getting their own evaluation of the odours and the gas toxic odours that are coming from the quarry, and compiling that evidence for their abatement notice. And I think we should let them carry on doing that, put the money behind them, which they need at the moment, and come back. So this amendment is sensible. It's also allows the council to move forward in a manner which is actually gets where we want to go in the end. But also, I think initially 3 is about calling. I'm going to stop. And are we having 1 meeting or 2 meeting here? Yep. Well, the mayor ruled that out at the beginning. So, yeah, okay, right. So 3 to me is really important. We cannot close this ourselves, but we can stand united, and we are doing, to support the closure of this, and that will lead on to the other things which we talked about, capping and restoration as part of a plan. So I move the amendment to the vote and ask all members to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. The proposed amendment has been moved, seconded and debated. We need to take a vote now on whether or not to amend the original motion as proposed. All those in favour, please raise your hands high. All those against? So the amendment's carried. Thank you. Members, the amendment has been carried, so the motion as now amended stands as the motion now before council, which we must debate and vote on. I will ask any members if they wish to speak on the motion before offering a final right of reply to the mover and seconder of the motion. Do any members wish to speak on the motion, please? Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Holland first, please. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I accept what members of the public who are now leaving are saying, but I very much don't feel ashamed. I've just voted for an amendment that strengthens the motion. I despair that for a group of people that agree on so much, and I am in full agreement with the anger that I've heard from the public gallery. I'm in full agreement with Councillor Jones, for example, who gave us an extremely detailed scientific analysis earlier on this evening. And I agree with the passion that we've heard from councillors like Councillor Fear and Councillor Fox-Hewitt. And it is a huge shame, given that we agree on so much, that we are getting hung up on process tonight, because it ain't helping us. It is only making the site operator and the people who are blighting our lives feel more secure that we're all disagreeing like this. So I want to reassure the public tonight that when we vote on this motion, as I hope we all will, and we'll send a strong message, that we are voting in favour of closure, that we're voting in favour of applying public resource that we have for the process that we can partake in, that we will be voting tonight to have a public hearing at which members of the public will be put first and not councillors, because we've heard quite enough from us this evening. And we'll be voting for all of this. And if we could only stop trying to turn it to our own political advantage, we could make some real progress here. So I hear what the public say. I am deeply sorrowful that some of them don't agree with me. Does anyone remember some years ago there was an episode of Doctor Who, Planet of the Ood, and part of the plot of that episode is to say that anger and public sentiment at gross and rank injustice comes out in different ways. It comes out in the voice of those people in the public gallery, some of whom are now leaving. It comes out in the anger that we've heard from councillors and in the calm, orderly way in which most of us have participated in this debate. All of those things are possible. It is possible for us to have open protest. It's possible for us to have public petitions. It is possible for us to have judicial reviews and public inquiries. But what we are voting on tonight, first and foremost, is to cap the thing off and to stop the tipping of waste at Walleys Quarry. I will say no more, Mr. Mayor, because I'm being in there. I agree. I agree with the members of the public, and I hope they will not be thrown out tonight.
We're finished. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Can you please leave these? Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody in the gallery. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. From the gallery, thank you. Thank you. I'm chairing this meeting. Would you please leave now? Thank you. More time, please. Thank you. We finished the meeting. It's now closed. Thank you. Councillors, we've actually finished the meeting. Thank you. Any members wish to speak on the motion as amended, please? Councillor Williams.
On the motion. We're speaking on the motion.
On the amended motion.
No, on the amended.
On the amended motion.
No, you don't speak.
Are we speaking now?
No, you don't want to speak.
No. Talk about. Listen to the mayor.
Sorry. Why?
Are we right?
Shall I just clarify?
Thank you.
After that hiatus, just to clarify where we are. So following the vote on the amendment, the original motion has been amended, and the amended motion, the motion as amended by along the lines of the Conservative group's amendment, is now the substantive motion. So that's what's being debated, not the initial Labour motion, but the amended motion. Okay.
And I want to make this point. Attending these meetings, I just feel like we're playing political football, kicking one ball and to the other to score a political goal. The Labour group's resolution is simple, calling for the just review. Yet we are debating an amendment to it from the Conservative, who have a majority vote and will push their amendment through anyway, irrespective of the merits of what is before them. The residents of our borough deserve better. It's their health and well-being that we're talking about. At the last full council, the leader of our council, Councillor Simon Tagg, stated that it's great that all councillors are working together to resolve this serious problem at Walleys Quarry, only to be upstaged by one of his own group, who stated that a Labour government minister, John Prescott, gave permission for tipping to begin. He's partially correct in what he said, but it's forgetting that a Conservative government deregulated a lot of the restrictions following the Environmental Agency, to whom the goalposts on what noxious substances could be disposed on Walleys Quarry. Does it really matter who did say anything in the past? What we want is action now. We're already asking for tipping to be stopped and sealed off. You would have thought that all the political connections that this council has got with the Conservatives, Castle Council, Staffordshire County Council, local MP, Crime Commissioner and government, all in the same political party, and yet they come together and put an end, they can come together and end this excuse me, Mr. Mayor, blighting our area, catastrophe, blighting our area. Now we want immediate action, bringing the Environment Agency's phallic and spirits to boot. Only a just review can do, no strings attached can achieve our goal. This administration has done what it can to stop the tipping, so now we need judiciary to get involved. I just want to end with this, Mr. Mayor. I would like to end the quote with the gentleman representing the fight for justice in the submasters fiasco. We are only the little people.
Thank you. Well, political footballs aside, I think we should be voting for what we think is right for our residents, and what's right for our residents is to close it, to do what we can with the abatement notice, to work within the powers we've got, and to involve the public in scrutiny. And following that, we can move on with everything else. But the most important thing is to get it closed.
Councillor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hydrogen sulfide gas released from landfill sites poses significant health risks to communities and individuals exposed to its toxic fumes. As a byproduct of organic waste decomposition in anaerobic conditions, hydrogen sulfide gas is emitted in landfills, presenting a range of potential health implications that warrant serious attention and concern. Exposure to hydrogen sulfide gas can have immediate and acute health effects on individuals, leading to respiratory irritation, nausea, headaches, dizziness, and eye irritation. Inhalation of high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide can cause respiratory distress and exacerbate existing respiratory conditions such as asthma and bronchitis, making it difficult for individuals to breathe and function normally. Prolonged exposure to elevated levels of hydrogen sulfide can result in serious health complications and pose a significant risk to vulnerable populations, including children, the elderly, and individuals with pre-existing health conditions. Moreover, hydrogen sulfide gas is known to have systemic effects on the human body, impacting various organ systems and physiological processes. Chronic exposure to low levels of hydrogen sulfide can lead to neurological symptoms, cardiovascular problems, and gastrointestinal disturbances, affecting overall health and well-being. Studies have linked hydrogen sulfide exposure to neurological disorders such as memory loss, cognitive impairment, and changes in mood and behaviour, highlighting the potential long-term consequences of sustained exposure to this toxic gas. Hydrogen sulfide can contribute to environmental pollution and degrade air quality in surrounding areas, exacerbating respiratory problems and increasing the risk of cardiovascular diseases among residents.
Councillor Moss.
Communities located near landfill sites may experience elevated levels of air pollution and odorous emissions, creating discomfort and distress among residents and undermining their quality of life. The presence of hydrogen sulfide gas can also contribute to the formation of fine particulate matter at other and other airborne pollutants, further exacerbating respiratory problems and posing health risks to individuals living in the vicinity of landfills. In conclusion, hydrogen sulfide gas released from landfill sites poses significant health implications for nearby communities and individuals exposed to its toxic emissions. This has gone on far too long. Attempts to mitigate this toxic gas have failed. It's time to shut Walleys Quarry for good and cap it off permanently, and allow residents of Newcastle to try to return to normal and healthy lives.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Allport.
Wow, everyone needs to hear. I'd like to discuss the impact of foul odours, toxic gases, poisonous emissions, whatever you want to refer to them, on our council staff that work in the vicinity of the site. While we may not give much thought to the smells around us during the workday, the truth is that the bad odours can have a significant impact on our productivity, well-being, and overall work environment. The impact of bad odours in the workplace is far-reaching and multifaceted. Firstly, there's an immediate effect on employee morale and motivation. It's challenging to feel enthusiastic engaging in your work when you're constantly bombarded by unpleasant smells, which can create a sense of discomfort and unease, leading to decreased job satisfaction and lack of motivation and also performance. Moreover, these odours can impair cognitive function and concentration, making it difficult to focus on tasks and make sound decisions. Research has shown that exposure to unpleasant smells can disrupt neural pathways to the brain, impairing cognitive performance and slowing reaction times. The cognitive fog can hinder productivity and efficiency in the workplace, leading to misled deadlines, errors, and decreased performance. This cognitive fog can exacerbate feelings of anxiety and overwhelm, leading to a vicious cycle of sleeplessness and heightened stress levels. Moreover, chronic sleep deprivation can be linked to increased risk of developing mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety, and increase any physical health problems you already have. The relationship between sleep and mental health is bi-directional. While sleep disturbance can also exacerbate existing mental health conditions, untreated mental illness can also disrupt sleep patterns, creating a vicious cycle that further compromises well-being. But the consequences of sleep deprivation extend beyond individual suffering. They have broader societal implications as well. Sleep-deprived individuals are more prone to accidents and injuries, both on the road and in the workplace, posing risks to themselves and others. Moreover, chronic sleep deprivation has been associated with decreased productivity, absenteeism, and impaired performance, leading to economic losses and reduced quality of life for individuals and communities alike. In conclusion, the link between sleep deprivation and mental health is undeniable. It's time we recognise sleep as a fundamental human need and prioritise reduction of these odours to enable residents to get the quality of sleep they deserve. And I still believe that we need to call for an immediate judicial review regarding this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems like the other side have got a lot more lively now. There isn't a public audience keeping them in check and watching their behaviour. I'm afraid that the amended version of... Thank you. I'm afraid that the amended version of this motion is an absolute disgrace. It removes all commitments. It is a motion that is to continue just carrying on as the same, bobbing along, having a chat about maybe doing something about it and leading to no definitive action. But I am afraid I will have to vote for this motion because, unfortunately, some action is better than minimal or no action whatsoever. So I'm afraid that I will have to vote for this motion. And that's because I want some action for my communities. What I actually want is definitive action for my communities, but I'm afraid that the amendment took that away. This amendment kicks the can down the road rather than deal with the problem now, which has been the history of our engagement with this. We're effectively voting, no matter what the leader might say. We watched the cabinet meeting, and you were going to ask the Environment Agency or try and persuade them to encourage them. We're effectively encouraging the Environment Agency to close the site. We've got no statutory powers there. A legal recourse would have actually taken us there. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we can do it within the quite tight timeframes associated with that. This motion will do nothing other than more of the same. It's a decision to let Cabinet carry on receiving reports, writing letters, and getting nothing done. So whilst I am forced to vote for this motion today, it's with a heavy heart that a very clear motion that would have had decisive action was hijacked by the administration, I think because they can't afford to stump up the 1 million, or perhaps for political reasons, but it has completely undermined any direct action we could have had.
Thank you. We'll be here all night if we're going to come. We've got another 4 speakers. Can we agree rather than, we've got to, because we're going on all night. You've got a very, very short one where we'll do Councillor Richards and then we go to Councillor Fear. Councillor Richards. Right, okay, that's fine. Right, okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Richards.
I feel that this amended motion doesn't offer the community around Walleys Quarry a guaranteed opportunity for judicial review and also making good of the site. So it's okay. Closure is a must, but what actions will take place after this? The amendment does not kind of take this into account. We offer to support and enhance the amendment. Where is the detail on restoring the site if Walleys Quarry liquidate? Who does it? What do they do? When they do it? And how are they doing it? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I suppose now, if you can't play to the gallery, applaud yourself. Why not? I seriously urge members in this chamber to look at the report, which was item 3, and to look at section 8. And in particular to look, as I said before, at 8.1 and 8.3. We are being told that a judicial review is some sort of silver bullet, that it will produce immediate action. It is quite clear from that is not at all necessarily the case. We need to have advice before we plunge in this way. And in particular, we seem to have a sort of Dutch auction of money for virtue in this regard as well, which is entirely irresponsible. The Labour Party should embrace this amendment. It actually goes much further than what they proposed. Judicial review is not ruled out by this amendment. What we want to do is check that it is appropriate to do, because look at the report, read 8.1, read 8.3. Instead of babbling amongst yourself, read something, you might learn something. At the end of the day, this is going to work much better than a suspension and something which may go nowhere. If it doesn't go nowhere, our legal officers, who are far more qualified, I suspect, than anyone sitting on this side of the chamber, will tell us that's the case. So let's not plunge. Let's think about this. This is an emotional subject, but if we're going to win on this subject, we need to engage our brains and not just think emotionally.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tagg. Yes, please, if you would do. Any more speakers, please? So we do one more for Fox Hewitt.
I'm going to say just.
Yeah, I think we'll just move on. Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for chairing. Can I just say, oh,
Mr. Mayor. It's appreciated. I just want to sum up by being very clear for the record tonight. I want to be clear that we brought this motion to resolve issues. We've accepted in good faith the amendments and we've tried to work with the administration. I say administration, but it's clear that it's the Simon Tagg show. If Walleys Quarry liquidate and walk away, you have refused to call a meeting to discuss full restoration. That was the amendment that we've handed in. Full restoration with interested parties. Not because it's not the right thing to do, but because Labour have said it. Now, that's not acting in the best interests of residents. You're focused on what divides us and not what unites us. I can see it, we can see it, and the public that were here tonight can evidently see it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proud of this amendment. It actually moves us a lot further than the original motion does, which was just, we came here tonight with a Labour motion to suspend, to ask the EA to, because remember, we can't do any of this, remember. We're talking about things we cannot do. We can influence and we can make statements and we can have a position. They wanted to suspend the operation of the quarry. We'd already taken a position at Cabinet, talked about it at full council on the 25th, about calling for the closure, and that sets off a series of events, which which I talked about earlier, which is the capping off and the restoration. And there's also plans which the partners are working on for any sort of abandonment and everything like that. That is not for elected members to look at. That is for the partners in the EA, the council, and that is also for the government as well. And it will actually be the government that would have to step in as well. And we would expect them to do so. So I'm really pleased to move this amount. I hope everybody supports it because it does bring about that stated aim of calling for a closure. And also it allows us to look at the judicial review. But I think the other thing it allows us to do, which the Labour amendment wouldn't, is to, the Labour original wouldn't, is to continue to pursue that abatement notice and to, as we are doing. And of course, it also has plenty in there about reporting back to members in the future, about having that public event for hearing for people to come in and also all the partners to come in. And also it puts that money aside to continue the abatement notice. So I'm quite happy with this. I hope all members support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Members, I will now ask you to vote on the motion as amended. All those in favour? Your hands high, please. All those against? Any abstentions? It's carried. Thank you. Concludes the business for this special meeting. I propose to take a few moments to allow the public to leave before we commence with the ordinary council meeting. We have a break for 5-10 minutes. Yes, 5 minutes.